Happy Thanksgiving Eve, Penn State fans. This is the Wednesday, November 26th edition of BWI Live. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I am Greg Pickle from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, where we are continuing to follow the Penn State football coaching search and get you ready for the Nittany Lions trip to Rutgers on Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Big Ten Network telecast, both teams vying for bowl eligibility. T. Frank, it's not the regular season finale we expected. I think back in the summer, we all thought that this would be a game where Penn State could potentially put itself in position to go to the Big Ten title game, or at the very least, secure its spot in the college football playoff rankings. And obviously, none of that has come to pass. They will go to Piscataway with Ethan Grunkemeyer as the starting quarterback, Terry Smith as the interim head coach. Could be the last time either of those guys occupies that current role that they have for the Nittany Lions. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, the winner of this one gets to go to a bowl game. Current projections, we'll talk about them in a bit, but looks like Penn State could stay local, which I think would be a very wise idea for the bowl game organizers if that ends up being the case. Of course, Rutgers is not going to roll over and play dead either. So happy Thanksgiving Eve. Happy early Thanksgiving to you and everyone listening. And it is Penn State Rutgers week. Here we are. End of November. Flew by.
Yeah. It did it. I don't know that anything feels like it flew by this year. It was a very, very long football season. But I also think, I always say I wanted to see something new in this conversation about Penn State football. I didn't think it'd go this way. I thought we'd go the other way before we went this way. But here we are, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Not what we expected here to end the season. But it is at least an interesting conversation we're having about a multi-layered season approach in terms of the value of the life lessons learned in a football season. I think we're down to those kind of conversations, plus head coaching search and, kind of picking through the debris to find the most interesting aspects to talk about with this team. But I also think that they've been compelling in the second half. Like, as much as this team was supposed to be one thing, I think their redemption story in the second half under Terry Smith has been compelling and interesting to watch.
It absolutely has, and I think that that's part of the reason why this coaching search conversation has gone the way it's gone, which, speaking of that, as Christian notes, our Nate Bauer has the BWI Lions Den message board hopping this morning. That's partially because he posted a new buzzworthy on the coaching search and what he's hearing about the Nittany Lions' pursuit for the replacement for James Franklin. So check us out over there, $1 for 7 days. It's going to get you through till next Wednesday if you sign up today. Will Penn State and Pat Kraft have an answer by then? Time will tell. Obviously, the Nittany Lions, I'm sure, in a perfect world, would like to have somebody on board early next week to try and salvage whatever they can of the class of 2026, with National Signing Day now, exactly 2 weeks away. So we'll see if Pat Kraft and Co. can get through with that. But $1 for the first 7 days will get you the latest intel and, of course, everything you need to know from Penn State Rutgers, so check that out. We're going to get to some news and notes to kick off today's show. Hopefully we don't get pelted with virtual snowballs, but we will start with Messiah Mickens, the former Penn State running back commit and also a Harrisburg native, is going to follow James Franklin to Virginia Tech. James Franklin broke his Twitter absence, which had been going on since his Northwestern pregame tweet back in October, 2 days before he was let go as a Nittany Lions head coach. So he's back. He has a new slogan for welcome to the Berg, is what it is, for when Virginia Tech gets commits to Blacksburg. So we won't spend a ton of time on this, T. Frank, but I don't think that's the last commitment Virginia Tech will get from a former Penn State commit, and that really shouldn't surprise anyone.
No, and it makes sense for a guy like Messiah Mickens, who's been tied to the program, and by the program, I mean the staff, for so long now. And some of the other landing spots he may have had, they dried up. The inn was full at Notre Dame, and there's a couple other places that he was looking at that made sense from his skill levels, kind of fit in terms of the program fitting his recruiting profile. But nothing really felt like it was going to fit other than where James Franklin landed. So, kind of makes sense there that in the interim, it was a lot about that. This is what we talk about. These are the moments where the relationships do matter for recruiting staffs. And I'm curious as to, what the other shoe is going to look like for Penn State when they hire a coach. But right now, again, I'm just going to say it again, as you mentioned, I don't know where the snow is coming from, but this is the low point. So if you're going to be throwing snowballs, just remember when we are giving you good news, I would be fine not getting praise for good news. Shooting the messenger, I'm not in favor of that. I'm not in favor of it. Sorry. Like that's how I feel about that.
Well, I'm right there with you, T. Frank. Speaking of messengers, I do have a good message to share. Penn State got through its first season of a renovated Beaver Stadium with no issues that I am aware of. So if you go back to July and August BWI Live shows or the conversation we had over on the Lions Den message board, there was a fair amount of concern, T. Frank, about these temporary seats and how it was going to all work and would it cause problems and would there be issues. And I'm not saying it was perfect because I don't know. I'm sure there's some anecdotal evidence out there from people that did not enjoy the temporary seating experience. But from what I could tell, it seems like things went off pretty much without a hitch. And because Penn State is not going to host a college football playoff home game, they can get moving on that construction a little bit earlier than expected. So it looks like they will bring a crane into town either this week or early next week for In Production, who put up the temporary bleachers, to take them down so more work can continue on that west side. And it'll continue pretty much straight through until the start of next football season, with some obvious caveats, like they'll obviously have to stop work for when the hockey team plays over there in early 2026. They'll probably find a way to let the football team in there. If the new head coach wants to be in there, they'll probably find a way to let the football team in there for, at least the blue-white game, if not other practices. So I don't think this will be a completely 100% working every single day of the week, every hour of the day kind of a situation, but darn close to it, T. Frank. And, I think that, again, for a $700 million multi-year project to kick off the way it did, certainly things seem to be on the right track, which is all Penn State and its fans can ask for.
Yeah, what they got accomplished in less than a year, building the structures to put those temporary bleachers on, I'm not a guy who knows a lot about construction, but that seems pretty impressive. And when we were there on Monday, so Saturday is the final home game. Monday, we're there for Terry Smith's press conference, and I was talking to some people who work in the building, and they already started work on the building as of Monday. So it was mostly like deconstruction from the season, tearing things down, taking out, booths and things like that from concessions. But they are beginning the process of working on the stadium immediately. And so there's not any time wasted. People were wondering about that, and yes, they are already at work on the stadium. There was not a lag of, has anyone thought about this? Just because you and I thought about it doesn't mean that they just thought about it on Sunday. They probably had contingencies of when they were going to start based on how the season went out and adjusted those as it became more clear what was going on. So they got right off to a hot start, and they're working on it pretty much as we speak.
You know what I'm looking forward to, T. Frank? Not driving across the frozen tundra of Atherton Street in the middle of December, or was it early January, whenever it was, to watch the press box fall down in the snow. I am not missing the opportunity to do that again this year as opposed to last year.
Yeah, that was wild. I can't believe that was almost a year ago at this point. We were in the middle of last season almost a year ago. In the middle of the postseason. I think it was towards the end of December. I don't think it was January just yet, because we were in the middle of the playoff run, which was in December. And it was the first snow of the year, and it was a blizzard. Like, we had 6 inches in the morning. And so that was certainly something I'm going to remember for the rest of my life, of having to get over there and then standing. You were over in the main area. I was on University, towards the soccer stadium, which you wouldn't be able to see anything from there now because they've got the practice bubble up, but that's what we were getting multiple angles of it for people, which you can still watch here on the YouTube channel, watching the press box coming down, and then the beginning of what we're talking about now, which it's crazy to think 2027 is closer than you think. Like this will be done sooner than you might think.
Well, the Penn State press box, not the only thing blown up in this football season. Penn State's hopes of making the college football playoff also blown up a long time ago, but they're not precluded from potentially making the postseason. And let's start with this, T. Frank, before we get into the projections of where the Nittany Lions could go if they do win their 6th game of the season on Saturday at Rutgers. Terry Smith is adamant that players there, he allowed for the idea that there be some exceptions, but he's adamant that these guys, most of them, are going to play in a bowl game if Penn State qualifies for one. And I just have a hard time wrapping my head around it, because on one hand, everything that he said about what this team would do for him is true. On the other hand, so much is going to happen between now and that bowl game potentially that it's just hard to envision it. Not saying it won't happen. It's just hard to envision it for me anyway right now.
I guess the question is who has what to play for. Does Nick Singleton need to play in the bowl game? I don't think his draft stock is exceptionally high, and yet we have 4 years of information on him. So is another game going to help him out? Drew Shelton.
I think that's where I struggle the most is this idea. Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I struggle with that the most, and I want to tee you up for this. But the idea, because you are the film guy, and the idea a lot of fans have, and it gets repeated pretty endlessly, is that, well, wouldn't they want another chance to put something on film? And I just think that you got to remember there's 4 years worth of film. If we went off of one bowl game film, we would have thought Smith Vilbert was going to be an All-American after the Outback Bowl. So, I think that idea of, well, they can put more on film, it's just not as important or as prioritized internally, I would think, as it is externally.
The disappointing thing, though, Greg, is that scouts and GMs are human, too. So they're also prisoners of the moment. And if you have strong momentum, meaning you're playing well at the end, everyone's going to believe, oh, he finally turned the corner, not, well, maybe the matchups were good for him. So, guys, Denai Dennis Sutton, right, is a guy who's going to impress the minute he walks into a room, and you're going to want to believe that he's the guy. So I don't think it takes anybody from a first-round draft pick higher, but I think it does influence whether you put him on your board or whether, where you put him on the board between a couple of different football players for maybe some of those other off-field reasons of like effort and grit and toughness and all the things that mean nothing until they mean everything to a football player. And like they actually are the difference between you and the next guy who's also ultra talented. So it's not nothing, but it's what is the balance of what I can prove in an interview versus what I can prove on the field. And I agree with you that like, if you're a good scout and you're not influenced by the latest shiny thing that happened, you probably have done your homework on these guys for 2 years now, because there's a opportunity for a lot of these guys to come out last year. So you had a prior knowledge of, especially the class of 2022 seniors. And I don't think it really helps you there. And then there's the guys that obviously doesn't help. Venga and Zaki and Katron. Like those guys, I don't see any reason for them to play in this game at all. Like there's no upside. They've proven everything they're going to prove as football players.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Obviously, if Penn State were to win on Saturday, they would not find out their bowl game destination until Selection Sunday, which is the following Sunday after Conference Championship weekend, of course. So no immediate resolution is going to come on that front. Right now, T. Frank, most of the projections from national media members, including On3's Brett McMurphy, have the Nittany Lions going to the Pinstripe Bowl in New York on December 27th with Pitt as a possible opponent. Yeah,
that's very fitting. The beginning and the end of the Franklin era, they go to the Pinstripe Bowl.
Yes, there is certainly some, full circle feelings, I think, that come from the idea of Penn State possibly going there the year James Franklin gets fired after going there the year he took over the Penn State job. And keep in mind, back then, Penn State, as the season started in 2014, didn't even know that it would be eligible for a bowl game. Got eligible in late September, ended up at the Pinstripe Bowl. Chris Godwin had a big night, and they beat, I think it was Boston College, to end the 2020 or 2014 season, rather. So time will tell on that front, but those are the latest projections. I mean, to me, T. Frank, I don't know if Penn State is bowl eligible. I don't know how they would not almost create arrange a marriage for Penn State and the Pinstripe Bowl. I just don't like, the lower tier Big Ten bowl games, which Penn State as a 6-6 team would be in the mix for. You talk about Nashville, you talk about Arizona, you talk about Detroit. Certainly, you could send Penn State to any of those places, but you can do all that, or you can try and get Penn State fans, a lot of which live in the New York, New Jersey area, to drive to Yankee Stadium on a Saturday, 2 days after Christmas. And I just think that you can do that. If you can do that, and there's a way to do that, I don't know why you wouldn't do that. I'm sure the Pinstripe Bowl would sign up for it. I'm sure the other bowls want Penn State to come, but like no Penn State fan in their right mind is flying to Arizona for the above rate bowl or whatever they call it these days on the day after Christmas. Like it's just not realistic. So we'll see, but that's where things are looking right now.
Yeah, I think that the other aspect of this that I find interesting is how many of the non-senior players, and this is a senior-heavy team, how many of those players are going to be on the team? And can you be on the team but also play in the bowl game? That's a really interesting. Can you be in the portal and on the team? And Terry Smith actually was asked about the portal plans for the team of like, what's your stance on where guys are if they decide to put their name in the portal? We didn't get to it yesterday, but I think this is a very important conversation piece for how this particular situation plays out in the next 2 weeks.
We're in a little bit different situation. Our guys are. We're in full support of our locker room. We're encouraging our guys to keep an open mind. We don't know what's next, so the most important thing is that we go play hard Saturday. Put on film what you want anybody to know about you on Saturday. We'll cross that bridge when it comes. The difference, I think, too, this year is the transfer portal's later. So they can go in the portal now, but you can't really do anything. We'll just cross that bridge when it comes, though, but we don't have a policy in place right now.
So a couple thoughts on that, T. Frank. I think the first one is obviously Penn State can't have a plan right now because they don't know who's going to be in charge of this program between now and potentially the bowl game. So
yeah,
that's number one. I think Terry Smith, I appreciate him always being willing to say the obvious because not every coach would come out and say like, hey, we can't have a policy because there's, the way this is where we are. This is the way things are. So I do appreciate that. But yeah, you ask a fair question because guys cannot enter the portal until January 2nd. And that is regardless of whether or not Penn State hires a coach between now and then or not. But that doesn't mean guys can't declare their intention to go in and can't start working on where they're going to go. I think you have to live under a rock to assume that these guys are all going to wait until January 2nd to actually start, and vice versa. Once Penn State finds a coach, their staff is going to have to, do whatever they can within the rules to try and set things up for when the portal opens too. Like the portal's open January 2nd till January 16th, but quite frankly, with the amount of time given between the end of most teams' regular season and the time that the portal opens, like January 2nd and 3rd are just going to be a crush of guys committing to schools. So there is a lot going on there. Let me see what you pulled up there. Go ahead.
This is just like the kind of conversation about what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks with the transfer portal. Here's Tony Rojas's Twitter profile. This is the Instagram breakup, right? When you break up with somebody, you scrub them from your social media. He hasn't made any announcement. He's been retweeting everything about James Franklin, and he currently has no photos on his profile. He also has nothing referencing Penn State in his bio. So, I know he's one particular player who's not currently active and playing and all that stuff. He's obviously from Virginia, but this is just like a sign of things to come to me. Like, that's one player that's a sign of things to come, of guys going to go into the portal and are going to exit the team, and that's just something that going to have to brace for. And I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how those decisions are played out in terms of finishing out with your teammates versus when can you even enroll if you want to go it's not until the winter. You can't go to your new school. So I don't know how all this works out from the what's the best for the player position, because I also think playing in another game is also good for a player. And what is the new coaching staff or what is the new destination? How do they feel about you playing in a game versus not playing in a game? All of those things and decisions is going to be fascinating. But yeah, future first-round draft pick from Virginia Tech, Tony Rojas, is no longer has Penn State in his bio.
Yeah, and obviously he's been out all season with an injury. Was at Penn State Beaver Stadium for Senior Day back on Saturday. So we'll see how that all plays out. But yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head, T. Frank. You're just going to have to brace yourself, folks, for guys leaving, and then guys might come back. Who knows? I mean, it just we've never experienced this, obviously. So we'll just have to wait and see how all of that plays out. But speaking of playing out, Penn State will play out the season this Saturday, at least the regular season portion of it anyway, at Rutgers, and you can be there with gametime.co. Like we said earlier, bowl eligibility is on the line for both teams in Piscataway, New Jersey. Cheapest get-in price, I checked this morning, it was $97, and you can sit behind the Penn State bench for $163. The prices for this were definitely higher than I thought they would be. which tells me a lot of Penn State fans in the New Jersey, Philadelphia, New York areas are interested in going to this game. I can't fathom why they'd be this expensive otherwise. So that was my initial thought. Like, it's always a Penn State takeover at Rutgers. Like, that's always the case, and it has been for the last few years. So I guess it doesn't shock me, even though this is a 5-6 Penn State team. But yeah, I was surprised too when I logged in to see that. But the thing I wasn't surprised about was how much the tickets actually cost. Because with GameTime.co, you know exactly what you're going to pay at checkout because there's no hidden fees. There is no surprises when you get the checkout. And if you use code ON3 at checkout, ON and the number 3, you get $20 off your first purchase. I love seeing views from the seat I pick, and I love the all-in pricing features from GameTime. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code ON3 for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. T. Frank, one thing I forgot from our early rundown, we'll wrap up the news and notes portion of the show with this. Penn State will be on the practice field tonight. You guys will be out seeing the Nittany Lions in action, and then also hearing from Terry Smith and some players afterwards. These sessions, as the practice time has gotten shorter throughout the balance of the regular season since Terry Smith took over, these viewing windows have got even smaller. So I'm assuming you're not planning to learn a lot from this thing tonight, but anything you have in mind you want to either see or hear on Wednesday evening?
I gave up last week. Chaz Coleman, is he there? That's about it. Like the backup running back situation I found bizarre yesterday or last Saturday, where all 4 running backs were unavailable outside of Cam Wallace. And I saw 3 of them at practice on Wednesday, and things can happen, but their heavy practices are Tuesday and Wednesday. They don't really go, they don't have, I don't think they have padded practices Thursday and Friday. Now, players have gotten injured, and seriously injured in those secondary practices, but it just was surprising to me. So I'm just curious what that looks like, and how, that's about it. There's not really anything else that I'm really interested in learning, because we've learned everything, and they're showing us special teams field goal and punt block during half of the practice anyway. I would say this. Terry Smith is very much less interested in being accommodating to the media than James Franklin was. That is a very clear thing when it comes to practice. Some of the changes have been noticeable on that side of things. And that's not me complaining. That's just me giving you a view of what has changed and just my observations. And by the way, I think it's probably a better plan because, again, I'll say this, during the James Franklin era, whether it was a third down play or whenever, field position, if you knew enough about football, you could see what they were working on in the passing game specifically during that practice. And yes, it's 6 minutes of video during one of their practices, but it's crazy the number of coaches that will try to gain any advantage. And so James Franklin was trying to accommodate the media, letting us be in there, and I think it was to his detriment at times, because the reason they ask us to do specific things of not show full formations, not show more than one player in a shot, is because if I can walk in and go, okay, I see what they're doing with Tyler Warren on this play. I don't know when they're going to call it, but I know that concept's in the offense, and so does anyone who watches that video. And Terry Smith, not interested in that. He's not interested in letting you see as much of that as maybe they have in the past. And there still is some. We still get some of that video. We still get some of that observation of their practice and what they're working on, but not nearly as much. And it's gotten less and less by the week.
Right. So anyway, you can see notes from practice over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Again, it's $1 for 7 days. So sign up tonight to get practice notes and obviously everything from the coaching search. And then you can also follow Penn State Rutgers and the rest of our coverage over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Also, right here on the YouTube channel, if you're watching there, we'll have the video of Terry Smith tonight, his final news conference of the regular season pregame anyway. So check that out as well. T. Frank, you got to hit an ad read, buddy?
No, the only thing I got to tell you is that today is brought to you by Andy Ludicky at My Perfect Franchise. We don't have a Thursday recruiting show, and Andy is a recruiting fanatic. He loves recruiting. He's a Texas fan, but he's been a part of the Rivals and On3 Network since its inception back in the early 2000s, and he supports the show, so he wanted to be a part of what we do here on the recruiting show. But it's Thanksgiving, so we're not doing that. But here's the thing. It is the season of being thankful. It is the season of holiday health and health and wealth and all those things that we're thankful for. And maybe heading into the new year, one of your resolutions is to change your future. And it's not too early to start thinking about the next chapter of your life, even if I'm talking about New Year's resolutions before Thanksgiving. Because here's the deal. If you want to be a successful person in life and dictate your future and the outcome and manifest your destiny upon the world, you need money to do it. And it's not a dirty thing, it's a reality. And so let's just have an honest conversation about that. Do you know how to build wealth? Do you know how to make a lot of money? Do you know how to be your own boss and schedule your time? Or are you spending your time making money for somebody else? If you live in the corporate world, you're in middle management, you understand how to run businesses, but you're running them for somebody else, maybe you should be running a franchise. Andy Ludicky at My Perfect Franchise, he helps you with that process to help figure out all those questions. Do you have what it takes, both from a financial investment standpoint and from a skills perspective? He'll find the right business for you to own, run, and manage. And that's the thing that he is really good at, and the thing that he takes pride in is finding the right business for the right person, and also knowing a lot about each industry, knowing a lot about what's trendy in franchise management. And by trendy, I mean trending up. Not necessarily is it a fad or not. And that's something he's very cognizant of. So he's not going to try and put you in a business that is just in a bubble. All those things, I'm just going off of things he's told me when we've had conversations in the past. I don't actually know what's the latest with this. I don't know much about business whatsoever. So if you do, and I'm talking to you, and you're like, oh man, I want that for myself, give him a call, 404-973-9901, or Andy at myperfectfranchise.net to get on his calendar. You're muted, bud. You're muted.
I am talking while muted, but thank you to Andy for being a part of us with the BWI Live Show. It's November 26th. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. One thing in the chat, Joel says, wonder what time on Sunday he's talking about what time will Penn State make the announcement. So I don't know if it's coming Sunday. I don't think anybody does. But I will tell you that when you're covering a team that's not in the college football playoff, this is legitimately one of the worst Sundays of the year, because you literally wait around all day for something to happen and nothing may happen. Nobody may announce they're leaving for Virginia Tech. Nobody may say they're going into the transfer portal. Penn State might not hire a coach, or all of it might happen all at the same time. You just don't know.
Or all of it is happening and just hasn't been announced. So You're waiting of when maybe and you don't, it's not official, so you can't say it. So you're just waiting to push the button. All of those things have happened in the past, right?
Yes, 100%. So time will tell, but you'll know first over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com what is happening, when it's happening. And if we need to show up here on Sunday, I'm sure one of us will find a way to get that done so we can keep you all posted as the news happens.
I'm not enthusiastic about the Bills this season. The offense has been hard to watch, so I'll be around. If they're playing, I'm watching, but who cares? We'll be doing this.
Yeah. I can't promise after about 2:30 on Friday I'll be of much help to you. But the Eagles' offense has driven me to just not really to feel almost like you. So I'm right there with you on that. At any rate, back to the Penn State conversation. The Nittany Lions go to Rutgers, where more records could be broken. I wanted to touch on this quick, T. Frank. So at this point of the 2025 season, Nick Singleton needs one more rushing touchdown to break Saquon Barkley's all-time mark for both rushing touchdowns and career touchdowns. They are currently tied at 43 and 53, respectively. Obviously, Katron Allen became the program's all-time leading rusher last season. He's 46 yards away from becoming only the 23rd player in the history of the Big Ten to reach 4,000 career rushing yards. That note comes from Penn State SID Paul Marbo. A couple other ones to point out to you, T. Frank. Singleton also just needs 136 yards to pass Barkley for the program's all-time all-purpose yards record. And then three you might not be aware of. I think most people are probably aware of those three, but three you might not be aware of. Ryan Barker has a 92.9 field goal percentage that is a current single season high. Ethan Grunkmeyer's 67.5 completion percentage and Gabe Nwosu's 46.03 average yards per punt are also both single season high in Penn State record history. So some more records could be shattered on Saturday at Rutgers if and when Penn State qualifies for a bowl game.
Yeah, those would be fun to watch. I didn't know about the special teams one. Of course, I didn't know about the special teams one, but I didn't realize Grunkmeyer's completion percentage historically was high. I know it's good, and it's been impressive. It's funny because I'm looking at, and yesterday I was trying to put together something of a comparison of what's the difference between Ethan Grunkmeyer's offense and Drew Aller's offense from like the way it's constructed. And they are similar in a lot of different ways. I guess I didn't look at the raw completion percentage comparatively to see, because I know Aller's probably wasn't nearly as good, but 67% of like a raw completion percentage is really high.
Yes, it is. So we'll see if he can keep that intact this weekend and leave this regular season at least on top or on track for setting a Penn State record during his first half season as a Penn State starter. So, all right, that's the Records Watch update. It's time to get into this week's edition of Best Bets. We're going to take a look at one basketball game and two football games. Here we go. All right, time for Best Bets presented by BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3 and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code ON3. It's a capital O, capital N, and the number 3. When you sign up, make this college football season one for the history books. Make it legendary. First one for me, T. Frank, tips off in about a half hour. I am going to the Thanksgiving week awesomeness where they just play college basketball seemingly all day long for multiple days in a row. It's one of my favorite times of year. This is the first day, by the way, in 42 days that we won't have a football game on TV, but it's replaced by basketball pretty much on around the clock. So there is that if you're a college basketball fan. If you're not, bear with us. We'll get to some football discussion in a moment, but I'm going to an 11 o'clock matchup between, you're going to love this, T. Frank, St. Francis and Troy. And St. Francis catching 22.5. I'm going to take them. So we'll find out by sometime early this afternoon whether we're 1-0 or 0-1 to start the week, but I'm going there, and I'm just going to keep rolling because I assume you have no thoughts on the Troy-St. Francis men's basketball games today at 11 a.m.
I did not know both of those programs had a basketball team. I did know that, but like that's my level of understanding here, so you're absolutely right.
All right, well, let's get into some football talk. My next one, going to the Egg Bowl on Friday. Could be Lane Kiffin's last game as Ole Miss's head coach. Could be his last game with his current contract because he'll have a new one on Saturday if he decides to stay at Ole Miss as opposed to leaving for either LSU or Florida or somewhere else. A lot of people taking Mississippi State in this game because of the beliefs distraction of Lane Kiffin's job hunt, if you will. I'm taking the opposite side. I think this team will come out ready to roll. I think it has the personality of Lane Kiffin that it does not. It just doesn't really seem to be bothered by anything. And this is a darn good Ole Miss team. So I like Ole Miss. I will lay the 7.5. I think they win the Egg Bowl convincingly. And then we all just wait until Saturday to see what happens. And Lane Kiffin, I think we can assume, T. Frank, will make his announcement in the most dramatic way possible.
Yeah, or the most dramatic or understated way. Like it'll be dramatic because it'll be weird, and that's
right.
A Lane Kiffin special. Yeah, I like this because it's also easy. Like this is a team that when they have the opportunity can put up like 40 points. So getting that having 7.5 there, that wouldn't scare me nearly as much with an offensive minded coach and an offense that can put up a lot of points and throw the football.
Right. So I would just say that I think that it will be interesting to follow both this game and then also obviously what Lane Kiffin decides to do. Last one for this week's edition of BetMGM's Best Bets. I'm taking the under in Penn State Rutgers. It steamed up to 56.5 from an opening of 55. I just don't think this game, I think Penn State probably gets into the 30s. I don't think Rutgers gets much beyond 17. And so, obviously, I'm kind of playing with fire a little bit here. I don't think it's a dead under, But we see what Penn State does. It runs the football and it takes a lot of time off the clock. And in its perfect world, if Katron Allen can't rip off 50-yard runs, then they're going to take 13-play, 87-yard drives all day over and over that take 8 to 9 minutes off the clock. And it just kills the number of possessions in a game, which kills the chance to score enough points for the over to hit. So obviously Rutgers throwing a good bit probably later in the second half of this game could put this in peril. But to me, T. Frank, I like the under 56.5. We'll talk more about that when we get into our predictions later in the show.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. There's a world where Rutgers can score some points, but I don't think it's a likely one. And the only way I think you agree with you is if Penn State has a Nebraska-like performance where they come out and just start chewing up yards, because they've proven they can be explosive on offense now. And Rutgers, just like we're going to get, like you said, we're going to get to this later. I was looking up Nebraska's run stats last week, and I made the mistake of not believing the information. I made the mistake of believing my eyes of, well, if I squint, it's not that bad, and I can see some of the things they're doing okay, instead of being like, okay, is the offense they're playing also terrible? And that was the answer. Then when you look at that data and you scroll down past Nebraska, you find Rutgers in all of the categories. So it should be an easier opportunity than it was last week. So take that for what you will. I'm with you, though. I would bet realistically the under feels safer than the over.
Right. All right. Well, that's this week's edition of Best Bets from BetMGM, and we will be right back after a word from them.
See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, and 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer now for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are not withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossings Casino and Hotel.
All right, that is Best Bets presented by BetMGM. T. Frank, time for another Wednesday staple here on the BWI Live Show, Stock Up, Stock Down. So we are taking this from the perspective of the entirety of the Terry Smith era as the interim head coach at Penn State. So we are counting stock up and stock down performances from as far back as the Iowa game through last weekend's win over Nebraska at Beaver Stadium ahead of the regular season finale at Rutgers. So let's start positive. Let's start with stock up, T. Frank. And everyone loves this new graphic you made for this segment for this show. So I'll let you do the bidding here, and you can kick us off with number 3 on your list of Penn State stock up players over the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, Nick Singleton, believe it or not, rises from the ashes. He's that meme of the guy that's resuscitated from the ground and starts beatboxing. I'm really impressed with the last 3 games specifically of his ability to see and make cuts and be decisive. And I shouldn't say be decisive because he was overly decisive before, but be correct in his decision making, because that was the biggest problem. It wasn't that his running style had changed. It wasn't that he lost weight. It wasn't that he gained weight. It wasn't that he's stronger or weaker. It was that he was not seeing the field. And they've simplified some things on offense for him to identify his landmarks a little better, I think. And it just clicked for him. Like whatever it has been in the last half of the season, it has finally clicked. And I wouldn't say during the entirety of this process, because there very much was a first 2 games and then the rest of them for this Penn State offense. And so I still think in the whole, Nick Singleton becomes the guy for number 3 on my list of stock up. And it's meaningful for the offense as well. It's been really important for him to be back to his old self.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And I'm going to go with a guy on offense as well for my 3rd pick. It's Andrew Rapplier, the Penn State tight end who caught his first career touchdown pass over the weekend in the win over Nebraska. His usage has skyrocketed, T. Frank, as Luke Reynolds has plummeted, with him having some issues with both drops and also blocking. So Andrew Rapplier, since Terry Smith took over, definitely one of the guys we've seen become more involved. And I think Penn State's offense has been better for it.
Yeah, he's been the best tight end in the last 3 games, to me, without question. And that's just because Khalil Dinkins has been kind of himself, and we've learned more about what Dinkins and his ceiling is. Like the athleticism has not translated to the passing game because I think the passing game nuances and his instincts don't really fit into the passing game. Rappleyea doesn't have the athleticism, but you look at him out there, he just looks like a tight end. He's got the body control. He catches the ball really well. He addresses the ball and is able to turn up field. He's physical. He breaks tackles. The only thing he's missing, is that kind of that top end speed to be a full on Tyler Warren sort of Pat Freiermuth clone. And really, he is a Pat Freiermuth clone because he's roughly that's what Freiermuth was at Penn State. And so it's really impressive to see his development. I think it's also important, Greg. He was a guy that we talked about as being a little rusty coming out of training camp because of the injury last year. And now that we're in the second half of the season, he's healthier. He's just more confident in his body, and it's showing that he looks like the guy he was previously. People want to say 9 months for ACLs, for knee injuries, and that's just when you're cleared. When you're actually good at football again, it takes a lot longer. And then from there, the year after, so in 2027, once he has another offseason to build his body back and get faster and stronger and bigger and refine, that's when you're going to see a step forward for a guy like Andrew Rappleyea. So the arrow is definitely pointed up, but I just think that we need to have a realistic, recalibrated conversation that these are not NFL football players. They are college players who are still in their development process. Physically, they're in their development process. So they're not going to bounce back the same way a guy in the NFL is, who all he has to do is rehab and get the confidence back in his knee. And even then, I don't think those guys are the same because the level's just higher. And so I'm very much team give them a full year after knee injuries. I wanted to put, and just as a spoiler alert, I wanted to put Anthony Donko on the list. But he's had one standout game. Last week was his best game probably since last year. I don't think he's been as consistent throughout this, but he's another guy that you can have the same conversation about. He's looked better in the second half of the season. Surprise, it was a year in November from when he hurt his knee. So here we are, a year later, and it looks entirely different.
All right, let's move on to number 2. Stock up over the Terry Smith time as the interim head coach at Penn State.
Number 2.
All right, so Penn State is we're going to go to the defensive line here. The Penn State pass rush has been better since Terry Smith took over. Part of that, look, is I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but part of that is playing Nebraska and Michigan State. When you say, where has this Penn State defense been or where has this Penn State team been, got to remember that they played Nebraska and Michigan State, who are not Indiana and Ohio State. And certainly one of the areas that is true is in their offensive line play. Both are among the country's worst in giving up sacks. Penn State's defensive line, to its credit, took advantage of that. So my stock up's Xavier Gilliam. Your stock up is denied Dennis Sutton. Go ahead.
I think you got that flipped because mine. I definitely think Xavier.
I'm sorry, you're right. Yes, I have deny and you have Gilliam. That's right. But I had Gilliam, then I saw you did, so I changed. So that's why.
You did. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I think it's pretty unanimous then. That's pretty good that we both agreed it's Xavier Gilliam. I keep saying this, and I'm going to say it here on the show. I've said it during the live in-game threads. Selfishly, there's a couple of guys that I hope stick around at Penn State because I want to watch their development. I've invested a lot of time in watching Xavier Gilliam go from a defensive end in high school who was obviously going to be too big at the next level to play D-end into a full-fledged defensive tackle. And I'm always looking for the next guy who can be the complete 3-tech at Penn State, meaning they're never going to have the nose tackle that is 335 pounds and eats up blocks, but also can pass rush. And I say never in this previous generation. That could change in the next coaching administration. They might actually find that guy. I don't know. That's the point, right? But they could find that 3-tech that's both a run stuffer and a borderline elite pass rusher, above average pass rusher. And they've struggled to find that. I don't think Zane Durant became that guy just because of his size. Xavier Gilliam, he's the next guy I'm looking at being got the right length, got the right movement skills. He's uncommonly strong for his size. And he's starting to not flash as much, meaning not as much low points. He's not hit or miss as much. He's starting to just hit. And I would like to see that kind of come to the conclusion as he develops in his career. So I don't know that that's a realistic thing because he's going to be very, very, very valuable, and is a guy who has his arrow directly pointed upward on an incline curve. I think he's going to be a guy that is a lot of teams are going to be interested in, but for sure, a guy with his stock up, and I think has been very good here in the last 3 games specifically.
All right, let's get to number 1. Yeah, for me, it was just Deni Dennis Sutton. Obviously, I had Gilliam as well, but Deni has been playing better. Obviously, the stat sheet indicates as much, and certainly his special teams play has been good all season and has continued to be under Terry Smith. Let's get to number 1.
Number 1.
You're going to say Dom DeLuca here, so good luck. I'll let you have the floor.
Okay, so I cheated here. And yes, I have Dom DeLuca, but I couldn't choose which linebacker I wanted to pick, so I picked the top trio, Dom DeLuca, Amari Campbell, Alex Tash. Honorable mention in there for Keon Wiley because I think he's been an integral part. But the linebackers in general, this group has really, as they've simplified the defense and as they've gotten more comfortable in it, they are starting to look really good. Alex Tash. Oh, boy, there's a couple of plays where he looked really, really good, especially last game. And Amari Campbell is the heart and soul of this defense. The number of tackles for loss, he misses some tackles. Like there's nothing I can say to take away the fact that he's on the smaller side. He maybe doesn't have the full length to get to all the positions and make all of the tackles. But he makes so many plays in this defense. I think he's, another guy that you could say, like, they really need to try and keep him. I don't know how that's going to work. And then they found out a way to use Dom DeLuca. He had 10 tackles in the last game, and they were not like diving tackles 6 yards down the field. He was both in coverage and in run defense. They found a way to use him and have him not be such a big liability. Now, did he lose his gap on a play in which they got 50 yards and set up that dramatic fourth down on the first drive of the game? Yes, that absolutely did happen, but he's making as many plays as he's giving up now instead of having it being hard for me to talk about it because I don't want to just continually berate somebody publicly when they're struggling to do their job. It's not that anymore by a mile. He is playing much better football in this defense. So I do think on the backside, he deserves to get some praise here of a guy who's playing much better and is a net positive for the team this year. Or in the last 3 games. Maybe not this year. That was too much.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So right now, Penn State, obviously, I'm going to take the easy way out here with number 1 and go with Katron Allen. Certainly, Terry Smith taking over said, we are going to feed Katron Allen the football. And it has worked very well. And obviously, he is now the record holder that he is in career rushing attempts and yards, in part because of that, in part because of how well he played earlier in his time at Penn State. But yeah, there's no doubt to me that he is the obvious pick to be number 1 on this stock up, stock down list from the perspective of the offense. So now let's get to the negative side of things. We're going to do stock down. So Penn State, again, we're doing this over the course of the Terry Smith era at Penn State, so not the full season. But T. Frank, I'll let you lead things off with number 3, a player Penn State fans have been talking about, and a name you brought up earlier in the show. Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't have 3 that I felt strongly about, but I had. Here's the thing,
so we can buzz through this.
Yeah, I was going to put Nolan Rucci on the list, and then he started the last 2 games and played really well. So I couldn't really do that, and so I went with Chaz Coleman, who's just been hurt, and that's really the reason he's not he's on this list, is that he hasn't been available. And when he has been, he's played well, but you know what they say about availability, and so that's why he's number 3 on this list.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And he's a guy you'll look for tonight at practice. Luke Reynolds is number 3 for me, so pretty simple explanation. The reason Andrew Rapplier is on the stock up list since Terry Smith took over is because Luke Reynolds is on the stock down list. So that's why I have him mirroring spots on this rundown. Luke's just had a tough second season at Penn State, struggled with pass catching, struggled with blocking, and that's why Reynolds got more opportunities. Now, he did have a great fake punt. Got to give credit where it's due on the fake punt run against Nebraska, but otherwise it's been a pretty tough second half of a pretty tough season for Luke Reynolds so far this year. All right, let's get to number 2.
Can I?
Number 2.
Sorry, T. Frank, you had a thought to complete there before we move on to number 2.
My bad. No, you've got the right decision, but just that I wanted to give him credit for at least not throwing in the towel, because that block punt, or that punt return, and he's been giving effort in the run game. Like, he's been trying, and he's out there.
Yeah.
You You don't see as many plays from him because he's not getting fed the ball and failing when he does get those opportunities. But his blocking hasn't been great, but he's been out there and you haven't seen a lack of effort from him. So I think that he's responded well to the changes in the offense, and he's playing and taking one for the team. And I appreciate that part of it, but there's no doubt you're right about the stock down part.
All right. Number 2 on your list is cornerback A.J. Harris. Why?
So and I wanted to bring this up, so sorry, that's why I was a little slow on the draw. He was starting every single play during Big Ten football in the Oregon and UCLA game. He gets benched, as you found out when you asked Terry Smith about that later after he took over. Got a bench in the Northwestern game, and he was hurt, but also has been rotating in the second half of the season. He hasn't been playing poorly. He hasn't been giving up any. He really hasn't given up any big plays, and he hasn't, other than a pass interference against Ohio State, which is not a pass given up, it's just an interference. And he hasn't really been targeted all that much. He's kind of been invisible in both a good and bad way, where they have been playing him less. Darius Dixon has been playing more, but he is not the number one I'm never coming off the field corner that he was to start the year, because he played almost every snap of meaningful football for the first 5 games, and then we've seen a different side of that in the last 5 games. So a little bit of a mild stock down. I had him at number 3, a flip-flop in 2 and 3, but I had him here at number 2 because Coleman, it's injury. A.J. Harris, it was a bit performance and a little bit, I think there was a wake-up call conversation for him in the middle of the season.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So similar to the tight end conversation, my number 2 here is Alonzo Ford. As his playing time has dipped a bit, Xavier Gilliams has gone up. So that's why he's on the stock up. Ford's on the stock down. Not like I said, like you, I did not feel very, very strongly about this list. So I think it made sense to rely on guys who have seen their snap counts yo-yo to fill out the stock up and stock down side of things. So I'd land on Ford. Gilliam, really nice player, come into his own in the second half of the season. And should be an exciting guy for Penn State moving forward. Let's get to number 1.
Number 1.
It is fitting that we both have the same number 1, and it is number 1 on the Penn State roster. It's receiver Kyron Hudson.
You had this. I couldn't think of somebody else, but also I don't think there's anyone deserving of the stop spot other than Kyron Hudson. And here's just some facts. I don't know if you had any of these. Like, he hasn't started 3 of the last 4 games, and part of that is formationally. Right. But also part of that is Kobe Howard started the last game. And so that's, to me, telling. And then you look at his target distribution. Since Iowa, he's had 6, 10, 13 targets. He had 13 targets in 2 games to start the year. So clearly the team's number 1 receiver is not the team's number 1 receiver anymore. And to be fair, like, he didn't start technically against FIU or Villanova because of personnel decisions. But that's not the case in the second half of the season. So he's a clear stock down from a snap perspective, from a target perspective, and from a general performance perspective.
Right. And I just think that you look at what this transfer receiver class has done. Penn State hoped that it would elevate its game, and it maybe has to some degree, but not probably the way they had hoped to. All right, that's it for stock up, stock down. Let's get into a Penn State Rutgers preview. Nittany Lions are a 13.5 point favorite as we sit here on Wednesday, November 26th at 10:53 a.m. Point favorite over the Scarlet Knights on the road. Kickoff, like we said, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time on Big Ten Network. T-Frank, I think you and I had the initial impression of Rutgers in that I would sum up my initial impression like this. Defense is a problem, big problem, and not in a good way for Rutgers. The offense may be a little bit more interesting than the numbers might suggest, but they're probably going to have a hard time throwing the ball regardless against this Penn State defense if it continues to play the way it has over the last couple of weeks. Long and short of it for me is this. I thought this number would open at 10.5 and go up, and that's exactly what's happened. And unlike last week where it went toward Nebraska kind of confusingly when it shouldn't have, this one looks to be going the right way with good reason.
Yeah, Nebraska's record, I think, threw everybody, including me, off. This week, I'm not fooled. They are everything that you think about Rutgers. They're the opposite this year. Their defense is terrible. It's the worst in the Big Ten, and that's saying something because Purdue's terrible against the pass. Rutgers is bad at everything, and you would think a Greg Schiano defense would be good at good at stopping in coverage, and they'd have some guys that on the back end are going to go play in the NFL. That's what they've been known for with Greg Schiano, but they just I don't know. The talent, the scheme, everything isn't really fitting this year, so they give up a lot of points. And the funny thing that you wouldn't think for Rutgers team and the player involved, Ethan Kaliakmanis, the old Minnesota quarterback, he's kind of good this year. Decisive. Yep. He's still got a weird throwing motion. Everything about what he does looks painful and it looks awkward, but now it's accurate and he's throwing with anticipation. But it's still Rutgers. Their skill positions are not great. Their offensive line is physical but untalented. They're not athletic enough to hold up in pass protection. They're not great in, run blocking outside of hitting guys. Their mobility, their ability to sustain blocks isn't great. So it's Rutgers plus good offensive ideas. I think I've been impressed with what they've done there under Kirk Shiraka, but it's just not enough. There's just not enough around the good ideas and the quarterback playing better to make a difference other than they've had a couple of entertaining games. They threw all over that Iowa team early in the year, and I think that surprised Iowa and surprised everybody else. They couldn't sustain it in that game, but they have enough juice at times, if you're not paying attention, to make it an interesting ball game. But this point of the year, probably not.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that this Rutgers team will try and play its hard as it can, but I just don't see the talent edge being overcome by that effort. And so I think this is going to end up being maybe not a complete blowout, but I just like the way Penn State's playing. Rutgers is off a blowout loss at Ohio State. Now it has to regroup pretty quickly to face this Penn State team. And like Greg Schiano said, both teams want a bowl. They're both going to come into this game trying to get a win. It just looks like there's an easier path for Penn State, which is why they're almost a 2-touchdown favorite for this contest. There's a lot of Penn State connections at Rutgers. You mentioned the offense and Kirk Shiraka, the offensive coordinator there for Greg Schiano. Some other folks there. Rob Smith is the co-defensive coordinator, former Penn State analyst. Vic Hall, former Penn State analyst, is the safeties coach. Danny Dalton's on that staff too, former Penn State tight end.
Oh.
So just thought we'd point that out for some Wednesday Thanksgiving Eve fun. But yeah, T. Frank, this just looks like a game to me where Penn State should be able to run pretty much at will, as much as it wants. And if they can get Ethan Grunkemeyer some easy throws, there'll probably be access lanes to get them because of Rutgers' concern. Greg Schiano said, you mentioned the rushing stats earlier. Greg Schiano said yesterday, T. Frank, that the running backs are what keeps him up at night. And I didn't really think too much of it because that's a pretty standard quote for an opposing coach to say about this Penn State running back attack, especially the way they're playing right now. Then I went and looked up Rutgers' defensive rushing numbers, and I don't. It's not even worth staying up over Coach Schiano because I don't really think enough hours exist between now and Saturday.
Take a Benadryl.
Yeah, I mean, it's just there's only so much you can do at this point of the season, T. Frank. The numbers are what they are, and they are brutal when it comes to Rutgers' ability to stop teams on the ground.
Yeah, I was shocked by these numbers. This is you bring up something tangent later about Penn State and the offense in this game. Remind me to get back to that. But the numbers here are just absolutely staggering. So Nebraska, 5.5 yards per carry is the worst in the Big Ten, right? Averaging almost half of what you need for a first down, over half what you need on a first down on one run. Rutgers is worse. They're averaging 7 yards a carry. 7 yards a carry. It's crazy. They have allowed an explosive run, which, by the way, is 10 yards, right? So it's not 15 like in a passing play. They've allowed a 10-yard run on 23% of their rushing attempts against. That is almost a quarter of their rushing attempts. So if you run it 3 times, you have the opportunity to get a first down without ever throwing the football. Right. Not every drive, but if you're averaging 7, you're going to get a first down. And eventually, if you just run it 4 times, you'll get another first down, and you've got 20 yards on 2 runs. It's wild for Greg Schiano defense to be this bad against the run. And that's before you even get to the fact that they've allowed the most passing touchdowns in the Big Ten. Nearly 9 yards per completion allowed. It's crazy how bad they are on defense.
It is. And again, I don't know that it can be fixed this season. I assume Greg Schiano is going to be the head coach at Rutgers next season. It's probably time for him to go get some outside help to fix this defense. Obviously, players come into it, but it looks to be, to me anyway, broken beyond just the players. Game prediction time coming up here on the BWI Live Show. T. Frank, we never get to do this together because this is usually a Thursday tradition on the BWI Live Show, but Thanksgiving gives us the chance to do this once a year. And I think Penn State fans listening to this probably have a pretty good idea based on the conversation we just had about where things are going. I'll let you lead off. Give me your rant first and then your prediction.
Yeah, so I'm always thinking about building. I'm always thinking about progression. I'm not thinking about, like, how do you just win the game, right? I want to know, Ethan Grunkmeyer, what's the next step in his ability to process as a quarterback, the offensive line, the receivers, the tight ends, etc. And we're going to get to another one. I got another one here queued up about the receivers. But in this situation of how they've learned to win, they don't need to progress anything. Like, there is no, like, okay, so next year we have this to build off for Ethan Grunkmeyer. It's just win these games. And so Penn State doesn't need to do anything else in the passing game. They don't need to open it up for Ethan Grunkmeyer. We're at the end of the story. They just need him to do what he did the last 6 quarters of football. I'm going to erase the Michigan State game. The 6 quarters of football against Nebraska and the second half against Indiana. That's all they need from him. That's it. That's all they need from him in this game, and they'll be fine. So, yeah, I have to recalibrate myself here at the end of, like, okay, what does X, Y, and Z mean for how they are able to develop this? No. Just stop that thought. He needs to play action, hit some chunks, and take care of the football, and they'll be able to win this game. And that's the end of the story. That's the end of the Penn State football story for 2025.
And your pick is?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Penn State. I think I increased this here. Yeah, we're hitting it at the same time. You go for it. I'm going to go 42. I'm giving them another field goal. 41-13. So I put in 38, and then I looked at all those numbers. My mouth hit the floor, and I gasped. And I went, okay, we're going to add in an extra field goal for Penn State.
I like it, T. Frank. I am going with Penn State 35, Rutgers 10. I just don't see the Scarlet Knights moving the ball enough. Like, the one thing I worry about this prediction more than anything, and especially as it relates to my call for the under back during Best Bets, is I worry about the possibility that Rutgers, with the passing offense that it does have and has had some success, can throw the ball down the field late in this game, get some garbage yards, some garbage points, and push this game over the total. But in terms of it actually impacting the closeness of this game, I think Penn State goes in, takes care of business, scores early, scores often, and gets out of Piscataway with bowl eligibility.
Yeah, I think that's a realistic place for them to be, for sure.
No doubt. All right. Any final thoughts, my friend, as we get ready to wrap up this edition of BWI Live on Thanksgiving Eve?
So this is something that was in the chat, and I just want to have this conversation quickly. Joel Nye says Penn State coaches failed Hudson miserably. And my reply was, I don't think that's the case. Yes, to a certain point, yes. But of the 3, I think he did less for the team than the other 2 did. I think the other 2, and here's the reason. He said every receiver took a major step back at their previous season. That's not on them. It is when you're the number 1 target in the season to start the year. And he was the number 1 target in this offense to start the year. Now, the offense didn't function, so they're not going to get the productivity. And what we're talking about here, to me, what we're talking about are stats. So Devontae Ross and Trevor Pena were in pass-heavy offenses at their previous stops. Ross was the number 1 receiver. He's not going to have the number of yards here that he did previously unless he was the number 1 and the whole offense was built around him. Injured to start the year, also part of this conversation. But he's operated roughly the way that you would expect, minus the fact that he didn't have, I think, the targets at every level of the field, where he did at Troy. Trevor Pena was miscast in this offense. He was given jet sweeps when he is a guy that's going to run routes and get open and create space as a route runner. And they're finally doing that for him in the play-action passing game. So things are aligning more where those 2 are productive. But to me, And again, I don't like doing this, but Kyron Hudson was put in the number one receiver role, and they accurately described what his skills were. Physical, contested catch, going to be a guy that you're going to throw the one-on-one jump ball to. And that was a critical failure of the offense, was to build around Kyron Hudson as the number one receiver. I don't think that was a good idea because he's the exact same guy he was at USC, just with more targets. And the offense has functioned better with him not as the number one receiver and as a guy that you go to in certain situations where you drop some one-on-ones for him and give him an opportunity to make those plays. Now, did he make spectacular catches? He has phenomenal hands and hand-eye coordination on the sidelines, elite, like high-level plays like that. But when you talk about down-to-down consistency, he's not any different than he was at USC. And he didn't get better, which you can say that is on the Penn State coaching staff. That's fair. But at a certain point, guys are what they are. And to me, like, that's why I have that opinion of this particular group and this situation. It's not out of nowhere. It's not without the context of the coaching staff, the offense, and Marcus Hagan's here. It is, like, I think there's the individual part of that as well. And that's why, like, I said what I did, and that's how I just wanted to respond to that, because I think it is a fair conversation to have about the receiver room and some of the major failures they had this year in the construction of the offense. And that's kind of why I landed where I did. I wanted to at least explain that to the group, you know, as we had the conversation in the chat, and we had kind of an incomplete conversation about it on the show.
All right. Well, there you have it. That is the story of Kyron Hudson, and that is the end of this edition of BWI Live. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. We will not have a show on Thursday, but we will be back on the channel with Terry Smith's news conference tonight, Wednesday, November 26th, and there'll be more content, of course, coming out as Penn State goes to Rutgers seeking bowl eligibility. T. Frank, happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. To our listeners, happy Thanksgiving to you as well. And we will catch you next time. It's been BWI Live. Stay safe if you're heading out on Thanksgiving Eve, and enjoy your turkey. We'll catch you next time.